Hello and welcome back to the Handstandcast with me, Emmett Lewis, and my co-host, Mikael Christiansen. How's things going, Mikael?
Yo, yeah, they're not too bad. Pretty much the same as last time, except I ate way too much candy today, so I still have a stomach ache from that.
Still has a stomach ache, and he is ramped up on sugar and caffeine, so today is going to be a great show.
Exactly.
Also had a day's rest as well, which is...
holy shit.
Mikael has finally graduated into the mature training zone of only training 5 days a week and not 7 days a week.
It's rather absurd, is it not?
It is. I never thought you'd actually reach the point. We've been talking about this for quite a long time. And,
yeah, too obsessed.
Whether to rest or not. Mikael's finally become a grown-up and decided to only train 20 hours a week instead of 30.
Kind of a grown-up, at least. Sitting here with my epic sunglasses on the fucking thing. That is as grown up as I
probably
would
make
get.
This a vlog.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's the kind of vlog. I feel a little bit like a Twitch streamer now. I should be this like totally fucking psycho man with his glasses on playing Super Mario hacks.
You should. Maybe we should be like Dr. Disrespect. If anyone's listening, that's topical at the moment.
Yeah,
but,
he got wrecked.
We should just get like, like wrestling characters, and that's our thing. We're just like.
Yeah, you can be the heel, and I can. What is it called? It's called the heel and
the heel and the turn.
Yeah, exactly. I saw that we can have kind of a feud and stuff. We set all that shit up and we earn loads of money. Yeah. So, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about the benefits of handstands and what you get out of them, I suppose, and possibly we'll go into some of the disbenefits of handstands or disadvantages towards the end or stuff like that. But
that's a topic.
It's one of these topics where it was suggested by our producer Lisa to do this one, and it's kind of like one of these things like, what's the benefits of doing handstands? You get to stand on your hands.
Primarily,
that's the show.
Yeah, you get to look kind of cool. I guess that's pretty much as far as it goes. Thank you for listening to the Handstand Factory podcast. If you want to, that is it. Now fuck off.
Yeah, it's definitely it's one of these things that's always because I think for myself, and I think for you, quite the same as well, and a lot of the people we would know and interact with in internet, particularly the internet version 1.0 sort of crowd we know. A lot of people just go, why did you learn the handstand? Why did you learn the trick? Why did you learn to do this? It's just like, it looks cool and I wanted to do it.
Yeah,
and
pretty much.
That there was no real discussion of like, oh, what is the benefit of this? And there was no justification for your activity.
Yeah, there was very little discussion about the functional movement within said discipline. At least I would say.
And then, there's definitely benefits that come out of it. But I think a lot of the benefits particularly when I look in the broader category of circus almost as well, and other sort of skill-based disciplines where they're not pushed too far on the physicality, though they are physical in their nature, is the benefits do kind of emerge over the years. And you look back and go, oh, that's where I got that from. That's where I got this from. Whereas it's not like I'm going like, oh, I'm going to learn a handstand because I want to be consistent in my life.
Yeah.
And I want to understand. It's just like, no, I do handstands and I enjoy it. And then I realize, hold on, to get better at handstands, I actually have to be consistent. And then my consistency at training gets better. Well, if you want to be consistent at training, you have to be more consistent in your daily life. It's one of these things that,
primarily.
I have a metric that I use with people that, like, for every hour in the gym you spend a week, you have to spend 15 to 20 minutes doing stuff outside the gym to facilitate that. And that's either washing your gym gear, pre-cooking meals, packing your stuff for the next day. It's just simple bits and pieces that go into it. Yeah, and this kind of is where, as people talk about, you want to get really good at handstands, you have to be you want to get good at anything, you have to be disciplined. But this is where the need and the space that this thing takes up in your life is what begins to force the discipline upon you. And then you become disciplined.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think it's in terms of handstands as kind of a specific, like you say, I think it's obvious to most people who have kind of done it for like an extended period of time, at least, that it doesn't necessarily like have these like massive direct carryovers into one and the other thing, though of course there's a certain like there's many things that like it will have or it will have an impact on, that's for sure. But I for my own sake at least, it's it did help me a lot to like in one sense organize myself, because I am a total mess in general, just as a person, in many regards at least. But like,
I'm not laughing too hard at that.
It's a very it's a thing you have to, like you say, consistency is like a thing, like one of the, perhaps the primary parameter of the entire thing. Because since you need that ridiculous amount of repetition to get absolutely anywhere, it makes you need to do it. And I mean, that's a double-edged sword, like we just talked about now, that like I am cardinal sin my cardinal sin is basically overtraining and overworking all the time, because I'm too consistent.
You've over-optimized your life, maybe.
Huh?
Maybe you need to start forming one of these life optimization gurus where you can teach people how to optimize their lifestyle to train 7 days a week for 10 years consistently.
Maybe that's what I need.
It's the next level.
I need to hire some sort of like, I just need a get rich scheme, get rich quick.
Oh, that's what I
need. Kaboom.
Optimize your life through handstand training and excluding all else.
But I remember like when I first got into it, I mean, because it does have this usually what I've kind of noticed, I love to compare hand balancing to a backflip, because I mean, I'm not great at backflips at all. Well, that all my friends know, but there is a kind of a very distinct difference between them, in the sense that like a backflip is very hard to try to do. It has a very high threshold to dare to do one, unless you have like a crash master and a teacher and so on. Whereas a handstand has a very low threshold. And of course, doing a very good backflip also takes loads of training and like years and all that. But like to get around on a backflip doesn't take a lot. Like
it's pretty.
Like if you're like loads of kids who just like, oh, I want to learn to backflip, and they just try 200 times into a pit, like they're going to be able to backflip to some degree or other. While with the handstand, of course, you find some people that do that too, but it does have this thing of it being, or it requiring a lot of practice. So it's kind of very easy to try, but very hard to master. And I think a lot of people kind of get caught up in that, and I certainly did. Just like when I finally found out there was a massive world within learning this thing, and it's, of course, like it did help me to learn a lot of other acrobatic style skills as well, just because you have that kind of awareness upside down. You build a lot of upper body strength, like flexibility is part of the training and all of that. So it kind of like physical preparation wise, it does quite a lot. But I think for me at least, like the changes have been kind of more like fundamentally on the mental side of the game, and kind of how I am as a person rather than as an acrobat.
It's definitely one of those things I've noticed a lot with a lot of the hand balancers I know, is same with jugglers as well, actually. People who push at the level, unlike a lot of other circus disciplines that I'm sure a lot of people I know who do other disciplines will jump down my throat on this, but it does seem to generate more mental changes. Like it's quite, I know from the juggling research, there's a lot of interesting stuff came out a few years ago on the neuroscience of juggling, where when you're doing repeated symmetric actions, so juggling is a repeated symmetric action, it increases the cross connections in the brain. And this, because it's symmetric and because you can do lots of repetitions, they looked at the study of, if I remember right, is children who are traumatized, or either children who were parents of alcoholics, and they tend towards having a personality type that is either very extroverted, or very introverted, either attention-seeking behavior or retreating behavior, basically. And one of the reasons for this, if you look at the brain studies, is because they don't have a lot of cross-linking between the hemispheres of the brains. And they discovered with juggling, we can increase the cross-linking in the brain. So juggling was the ideal thing. And I've actually, before I read this study, before someone sent it to me, I'd seen this so many times in the juggling community. I don't know if a lot of people know, I'm very big at juggling, or was very years ago. And I'd go to a lot of juggling clubs. I'd meet up with a lot of people. I'd go to a lot of conventions, and you'd kind of meet these people who'd kind of not going to say they were from any sort of issued household or anything, but they'd just be like your standard kind of introverted STEM person. And they take up juggling. And, you know, get to know them. Maybe I'd teach them, maybe I wouldn't, whatever. And 2-3 years later, you have someone who is like suddenly a new person. They're like, oh, you know, I'm just doing a show. I've quit my job and I'm going to become a performer. Whereas before, this person would like die in front of a crowd of 3 people or just not speak at the kind of social functions that go with these.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they're like just new. They're just a new person. And it's one of my suspicions that I think this happens in handstands as well, because it is a symmetric action for a huge part. And a lot of our actions in the body are not symmetric. If you look at most of sport, in the unilateral or asymmetric happening at a time.
I guess, though, there's also, of course, the entire thing of, I mean, you start doing something, you get good at it, you find social acceptance and all of those things as well. So I guess it's hard to study in a vacuum.
Yeah.
But like that's one thing that I think a lot about when I started this. And that's a kind of also connected with performing and all that, but the change as a person in terms of like getting good at something. And I think handstands has this, like, because of the thing I said before, with it being easy to try and really hard to master, and it being an impressive looking feat, it becomes this kind of bastion for a lot of people of kind of where they feel that they have their thing. If I master this thing, then I'll feel good about myself. That kind of and that entire train of thought. And I was certainly there, like in my youth, especially with breakdancing and stuff. That was everything. When I can do the thing and this and that, then I'm a cool dude. Like, yeah, all of that thing, that all of the stuff you don't want to admit when you're a teenager or younger, but they are actually like the primary driving force. But then, like,
when I do this, the girls will like me.
Yeah,
when I juggle 9 balls,
exactly,
the girls will like me.
All of that shit.
When I can air flare, the girls will like me.
Then I'll be cool. And then you kind of, like, all the years pass, and like you either get or do not get kind of the affirmation or whatever you sought. But I think since these types of practices are so that if you put in enough hours, you will quite likely get very good at it. Then it kind of becomes this grind and this kind of proving yourself to yourself sort of endeavor. And I think that can be both good and detrimental, and it certainly has been both of those for me. But I think that's something I recognize a lot with hand balancers. This very obsessive trait. And there's actually there's a book, there's a guy in Stockholm, you should know about him, John Paul Zaccarini.
Oh, I know John Paul.
Yeah, so he was...
I like him. He gave me full marks. He graded our end of year projects in circus school. He gave me like an A++. I was like, boom, I like you.
Yeah, so he so basically Jean Paul Zaccarini is he's a circus artist, and he's now
circus director.
Like he works at the University of Dance and Circus in Stockholm. I don't remember if he's done with his PhD in circus there or if he's working on it. I think he's done at this point.
He should be done by then, because he was doing, I think he's
Wait, I'm an idiot. He's done a long time ago. What am I talking about? I know he's done. I'm an idiot. I even spoke with him about it being
world's longest PhD. Just a side note on John Paul Zaccarini. It's one of a fantastic circus directors, very creative, very interesting. And it was also kind of interesting, just segue slightly, is a lot of his shows had a lot of themes of gender politics and gender play, I'll say. I won't say gender confusion, but very, like, going back to 2006, 2005, I can remember seeing some of them. So it's kind of interesting that he quite had his finger on the pulse of kind of like things that are quite topical nowadays.
Yeah,
in the political sphere.
Talked about that for a long time.
So yeah, so he's if you ever get a chance to see anything he's directed, do go and see it. It's amazing. I really like his stuff.
Yeah, and he's a really clever guy, and he I've also seen several things that he has done, like mostly here in Stockholm. But he basically wrote a lot about like various. He kind of was using a psychoanalytical type of or methodology, looking at various circus artists. And now I'm totally not going to try to cite or remember too much of this here, because I read it very many years ago. But what I found very interesting from the kind of general idea around what he was writing was how people or circus artists then, and I guess a lot of people tend to use these various high physical disciplines to kind of deal with themselves, and that I found really fascinating, and I would recognize a lot in types, or in the way of like how kind of obsessive people, like you gather all and focus all your energy into this like one certain field, and by mastering and getting good at that, you kind of also master and get better at yourself as a person. And I just found that really kind of, it hit me quite a lot. I've seen that with very many hand balancers that kind of use this as some sort of like either a calm zone in themselves, or a way of challenge, or a way of like expanding themselves through this practice. So it's certainly like some common denominators there between practitioners, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. I think you get this a lot in I see it in powerlifting a lot, actually, as well, just on slightly on the fitness sphere of people who don't even compete, but they're literally just competing against themselves. And it's kind of, with a lot of these skills, particularly the ones that have I'd say a high risk component, but a low physical risk component. Whereas like your risk of handstands, you kick up, will you not make it? Powerlifting, will you not make the lift? It's going to go on the racks. Juggling as well, you would see the same thing, do I throw and catch my balls? There's no real actual, if you're doing it safe in powerlifting, obviously, but there's no real risk if you fall out of your handstand, you twist out and you go back to your feet. There's no real risk if you drop in juggling. But what they do is they put you into a direct confrontation with the self of like, I proposed to do this, and then I didn't, and there's only me, and gravity really is dictating whether I did or not. And gravity is just constant, basically. So then it's just me. It's just a direct confrontation with what you think you can do versus what you actually done. And it's very interesting when you get into this. It's
I guess it's also you versus the federation in certain ways. Like did I succeed or not? And I think that's where kind of the bad side of or like the kind of dark side of this can come in, because then suddenly it becomes like, if I don't succeed, I'm not worthy of feeling good about myself. And I think that is a rabbit hole that is really deep. And I know very well how it is to go down that way. And I think that,
speaking of which, speaking of the Federation and other stuff, do you know Marlo Fiskin?
Yes.
Yeah, she wrote an article. I haven't read it yet, but it's making some waves of basically toe point superiority and basically the expression of the Federation in pole dance, I suppose.
Yeah, I saw that one come up. I haven't read it yet either, and I thought to do so to see kind of the arguments. Because I mean, there's certainly a lot to be said for kind of ballet, and I guess also in circus, in terms of like all of the traditions and what they're built on and so on. But yeah, I mean, it also depends on what kind of perspective you are looking at it through. I mean, I would certainly tell someone who is learning a complicated skill to point their toes, in case that it gives you a better sensation over what your body's doing. That is more how I look upon. Like, that's also, like, we've talked about so many times about the line, that like I don't give a shit if people comment like, oh, the line all the time. It's just like, well, why do you want it? Is it because it's like it's the parameter where, again, is it the parameter that you choose your worth as a hand balancer? Now I'll be part of the crew that can do this specific thing. Like, yeah, it's dictated on like this culturally decided factor of, okay, a straight line is pretty. Yeah, sure, it has some aesthetical components to it, but like, why only that?
Yeah.
So
it's definitely it's one of those things. We probably need, did we do a line episode? We probably need to do a line one, just bitching about the line.
Yeah, we have barely talked about the line much. There you see, we don't talk that much about the line. Yeah, if you want to learn the line, there's very specific physical things that is about the line that's really great to learn if you want to get good at handstands. But the aesthetical quality is only that, an aesthetical quality. So it's
definitely it's one of those things. It's as I say, we have to learn all these things because they're like the scales. You learn to play the scales before as you're playing an instrument, but then when you want to play music, sometimes the scales don't get played at all.
You can fuck out as much as you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted
to the benefits.
I just wanted to get back to kind of that dark side thing, because I had something to say on that. What the hell was it? Cool. Just about the kind of the way that can kind of lead you to because that's the thing. Like a lot of people that start with this and want to master it, they put we put a lot of social value into it, or like a lot of value into it, like, and that becomes a kind of matter of judgment, good, bad. I managed to stay up. I held the move. I did not hold the move. I dropped the ball. I caught the ball. It's like there is kind of, like you said, this direct confrontation with the self and with kind of the, how to say, the socially accepted laws of the trick or the disciplines or whatever, which will dictate whether or not you can feel good about yourself for succeeding. And like, first of all, I think it is absolute nonsense. And I think everyone who says that they are never affected by this, I think they're total wankers and liars, because they are. Everyone is affected by what they do and what they experience, but we can be affected to different degrees, which means that like the effect that this had on me 10 years ago when I got super frustrated about moves would be way stronger than the effect it has on me now. But sure, I can have a shit day and get really pissed off, but like, it won't happen as often as it used to, because of all, like, you get jaded, then you stop caring as much, as happens with most things, and then you're able to basically cope better. But I think that it's easy to give these constructs a bit too much power and value over your life in a sense, and I think that's kind of the good versus bad there, because it can certainly bring a boost in confidence, and it should. I mean, you learn something, you're allowed to be proud and happy about that, and to replicate it and feel good about doing it. And then you switch your focus, you start with something new. Maybe you never managed to do this thing, you get frustrated and annoyed. That is also fine. But to what degree do you allow that to dictate when you leave the training? Like, it's not like you're not allowed to feel bad for sucking, because sometimes you do and sometimes that sucks. But like, there's a scale and a continuum of energies here, rather than like a black and white. No, I get exactly what you're talking about. It's a process I talk about a lot with some of my students of I call it the virtues and the vices. That every practice we do, every physical practice, does not matter what it is, stretching, I don't know, even origami, everything. It has a virtue, and our goal is to get in and get the virtue, but don't go too far into the vice. Now, you will always get a bit of a vice with the virtue, but if you push it too far, then it becomes, the vice comes emergent. So a simple thing is like, simple way to think about this would be like, squatting is good. You know, depending on your activity and you want to build it up, you squat too much, you'll make something explode and you won't be able to do your activity. Simple. You know, so that's the vice of squatting, is you'll do it too much and explode. In other ones, it's a bit subtler, but there is that one. So it's always that idea of like, learn to temper yourself. That's one of the benefits of handstands. You know, it's one of these things, you will push your body too far. That's what I kind of like about handstands in some ways, is you will push your body too far at limits, but when you break yourself doing handstands, it's not actually that bad compared to breaking yourself doing motocross or something. For sure. You know, it's the injuries we tend to get in hand balance. They're generally overuse injuries. They're generally inflammation based. They go away and they're easy enough to rehab. Whereas, I don't know, crashing a motorbike. It's also interesting in the sense that like, that's the funny part though, that like, to be able to deal with yourself better in like these kind of skill scenarios. I haven't even had a couple of people contact me on Instagram asking like, like, I struggle a lot with the training because I put so much pressure on myself and I kind of destroy myself. Like, okay, it's at least good that you see that like you're doing that, like having a negative effect on yourself. Like, that's at least a good thing to acknowledge it, because it's really easy to just run that mill and just like, you keep pushing, and you get smashed, and you still don't want to recognize that like you might need to change something.
Yeah, but this is good when someone starts recognizing that I'm smashing myself at training, but I'm still smashing myself. It's very good in terms of like, oh, we have an actual moment of awareness there, where you're like, you're aware of your own actions and the positive and negative effects on your body. Now, maybe you can't change it at that time. It will still take a bit longer, but it's still bringing a level of I don't know, consciousness, I suppose.
Yeah,
you're doing.
You're at least seeing what you're doing, but like, as with everything, there's a long, or sometimes at least a long road between actually recognizing the pattern and then being able to changing it. Very often it's like, oh yeah, but I know that now, so now I don't need to think about it. And then you just reproduce it to slightly differently, and you kind of cognitive dissonance just cover it up, so you don't need to think about it. But that's the funny thing too. I think that, I mean, that's more kind of on the philosophical level of things, but I mean, you need those kind of levels of hardships and fuck up to have any, like, to be able to change, at least for my own sake. The one thing that changed me the most in terms of both performing and training was when I was with Knitting Peace with Circus Circur many years ago, and I basically just nuked my lower back doing this ridiculous scene, and we had done it way too much. Maybe I've probably talked about this before. We did.
I don't think you have, actually.
I haven't. Anyway,
no,
so like there's a really weird scene, and we're actually going to do it again next year. I can't wait. It's going to be hilarious. But so we had played the show way too many times in a row, and I was a complete idiot. I trained way too hard in between. Like, I would train before the show or after the show, train on off days. Couldn't sleep because we would finish the show really late at night and just be like out of my mind, adrenaline pumped, then have a big meal, come home and just be fucking just tweaked for the rest, like until like 4 o'clock. So it was just a pretty bad period, and I was busted, and then I pulled something, I think it was the hip flexor on my right side, psoas or quadratus lumborum, something in that area got like a proper bust. So I barely could walk when I woke up one morning, because like essentially what I was doing in the show was I had a harness on, and then the harness was connected to a slack rope, or one end of the slack rope. The other end of the slack rope was attached to the other side of the stage. Then my friend Alex, he lie down on the rope, and I would start walking forwards, pulling the rope forwards, which lifts him up while he's lying on his back, balancing on the rope. And then I would proceed over to the side of the stage. I would grab the truss and I would start climbing it with his weight hanging from my lower back from the harness. And I would climb, like I would climb it up. And the thing is, like, at that point in the show, I was so soaking wet from sweat, and I was super duper warm. It was in the second act of the show, and I was as kind of that physical readiness you get from adrenaline. Like, it was like at 100% at that point. So I would clown the scene. I would kind of pretend that I was falling and kind of hang almost in a flag with his weight from me, pull myself back in and climb the truss. And then there was a carabiner that I would hook onto the truss, and then he was actually fully hanging from that. And yeah, then we would do a lot of other nonsense. Like one night we did this, and my hip was sagging behind, and I remembered that, like, oh shit, it felt much easier when I pulled my hip forwards. So I I thrust my hip forwards really fast, and I would feel this kind of tiny explosion close to my spine.
Mikael with the vigorous hip thrusting.
Yes. And I was just like, oh shit, that hurt, whatever. Went on, did the rest of the show. And went home. We go in the day after, we did it again and did the full show. And then a friend of mine told me, like, yeah, why don't you stretch your hip flexors? So I lie down on a foam roller. I put the foam roller under my sacrum. I pulled my left knee towards me and let the right leg, which was the one that, like, the side that was busted, I would let that elongate, and I lie there for 2 minutes and I couldn't get off the floor. So we had to get a replacement in, and it took me 6 months to be able to, like, I could one arm during those 6 months. I could stand on my hands. I could not do a leg lift to save my fucking life. The worst thinkable thing would be to lift to a meat hook, where I would do a leg lift and twist to the side, towards the injured side. I remember, like, I was in the cinema and I was gonna, I literally brought a handstand block to the cinema so I could put it in my lower back so that I couldn't slouch at all. Because slouching and standing up, it would take me kind of 30 seconds to straighten out, and I would feel like I was 75. It was dreadful. And it lasted like it took a prolonged amount of time before I was back to action. And then for some reason, I told you about this before, Emmet, but I basically, the one thing that saved me, because we were going to Chile to play shows with Knitting Peace, the same show, and it was 3 weeks until that, and I was like, fuck, I may better call them and have them get Kim, my friend, to replace. And then I grabbed one of those like ab wheels, ab rollers, and I did the 3x10 on the knees, and I was like, hey, why can I suddenly bend forwards and sideways again with no pain? I remember I kicked up into a handstand and did a straddle flag, which I couldn't bend in the side for whatsoever for 6 months. And I could suddenly do it. And I did 3x10 ab roller for 3 weeks. I went and played the show and no questions asked. So somehow that's helped for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But
got things turned back on.
It changed. It changed my approach quite a lot, because like I was like, okay, this is not sustainable, and I started to take significantly more care. And I mean, even now I've been like smashing myself the last year, and now I've had another one of those like, hey, shit, yeah, I shouldn't. I'm 35. I shouldn't train 6-7 days a week anymore. Maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe it never was a good idea, huh?
So just the slow learner.
Imagine that, Emmet. Imagine if it never was a good idea to train 7 days a week. How
but
about
that's
that?
Wrong. You're meant to train like twice a day, 6 days a week. I heard.
Guess who did that for like 7 years in a row, 365 days a year? It's not smart. Don't do it. It's not cool.
Yeah. Maybe it is. You can get Instagram points about how cool you are.
Yeah, it's like, hey, anyway, I'm so hardcore.
Let's bring us back on topic. So one of the things I'd actually like to segue onto, that I'm not sure how much experience you've had with this, but I've had a lot of students over the last 10 years, people who trained with me, who were dyspraxic. And
dyspraxic, what do you put in that?
Dyspraxia is kind of like physical dyslexia. Is the easy way. It's a coordination. It can be coordination issues. It can have multiple causes. It's one of these things that well beyond my scope of diagnosing or anything. I always just, people come in to me and say, oh, I'm dyspraxic and blah, blah, blah. And I've had a huge amount of success helping these people, like a serious amount of just where, it's the classic story where these kids are like, had developmental issues maybe, or just were diagnosed as dyspraxic at age 4, 6, between 4 and 10 is the normal diagnosis. And their conclusion was, they're never going to be good at sports, always going to be clumsy, always going to be, always last to pick for gym class, the classic story, and always the kind of academic kids. Now, my interpretation of it is a bit different, or my explanation of it is that maybe what we give our children, if we look at them in primary education and senior education, is probably what I would consider the minimum amount of physical activity to keep them sane.
Yeah,
we don't give them a lot of recess time. We make them sit down. Maybe, just maybe, some children need more than that recommended minimum dosage. That's the best fit. Maybe they just need more time and more practice, and then they'd be okay. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm obviously open to be completely wrong on this. And if anyone's listening in and is an expert on this, voice note us, and we'd definitely be keen to talk about it. But so one of the things I notice with these people is they'd come to me and they go, oh, I want to do X. I want to do movement generally, or I want to move better, or whatever they're sort of saying to me at the time. And, as a matter of course, like the two things I generally teach everyone is handstands and juggling. And these are just kind of, they're not really part of the training, but I just suggest them to people. With the handstands, what I've noticed, the people have gotten fairly good. No one's gotten to one arm from this crew yet because they've gone on to different things, which is perfectly fine with me. But with handstands, there's just this level of challenge to the body that begins to fill in the gaps in their body awareness. And you can almost track it over the course of their training, how much more coordinated they get in everything they're doing. Whereas before they might have been doing bodyweight training or normal weights or something, and they're still feeling things aren't working or disconnect to their body. But there's something with the handstand training. Maybe it's the inverted position challenging the balance in ways that is not normally challenged. Maybe it's just like, with handstands, particularly when you're learning, we have to force the mind into the body. We have to basically, get you to feel your kneecap. Why is one knee contracting, the other one not? Why are you externally rotating one leg and the other? Why is your toes pointing but unpointing? And just constant kind of self-checking in on the body seems to just fill some proprioceptive gaps that these people have that isn't done in other skills. So I think particularly at the early stages of handstand training, we're thinking, our basic wall drills, our basic wall alignment, they're complicated, but they're not they have variety, but the variety is kind of internal variety. Like, why is one rep not like the last one? Why did you set up differently? It's not an outside variety where it's like you dodged the ball, but the ball came at a different angle. So this repeated action, this is my hypothesis, seems to just give these people who are missing the chance more and more practice at something that they slowly start filling in the gaps. And it's interesting, like they all kind of report the same thing, which is, my observational evidence here, so take it with a grain of salt. But it's just like, I feel more in tune with my body. I feel more connected. I can feel things that I haven't been able to feel before. Now, obviously, maybe this is just them never trying to feel these bits before, but there's definitely something to it, and it's worth exploring. And it's one of the things I've seen more than, I don't know, I've had about 20 or 30 of these clients over the last 10 years, where, we seriously got to the point where like, oh, they say to me, by the end of this thing, it's like, and that's the thing, it's been universal across all of them, that all of them have said like, oh, I don't feel dyspraxic anymore. I'm more coordinated in my day-to-day life. Things that were challenging weren't, they're still not maybe going to be natural athletes and suddenly picked to play American football at the top level, but there's something in the practice because it's simple. That's what I like about hand balance. That's why I teach it. That's why I'm so fascinated by it, even though I've never pushed it to Mikael's kind of skill levels. It's kept me captivated because of the simplicity. And it's just, it's simple. Just turn yourself upside down and stand on your hands. But then maybe something in your body or something isn't allowing that at that time. So something else has to change. And then you have to find that. And it's kind of like it brings people in contact with their body. Now, obviously, I was using the dyspraxia thing as kind of an extreme level of it. But it's the same with this kind of consistent practice where you're like, oh, I wasn't able to feel this before. Or the exercise you're doing, like say in a push-up, because you're moving the body up and down, you don't get a long time, maybe a dish hold or a plank, you might get this thing. But in handstand, it's like, oh, it has a kind of skill tree to it as well, where it's like, oh, I've seen how my body works and I see how the mind and the body can coincide, and I feel, I can feel my body better. Okay, well, now we're going to make you balance. And suddenly you're back into the chaos of balancing, and your whole proprioceptive map you've built up is gone, but now you have to find it again. And it's kind of an iterative process, I suppose.
Yeah, something that I've thought a lot about is that, like, in one sense, you're basically re-experiencing what you experienced as a baby, learning to stand. Like, none of us remember how it was to stand. But I must assume that for like the baby brain, this, like there is something that makes us try to do this thing. And like if the baby brain makes sense in the same way as adult brain or like adult brains do, then perhaps there's some sort of satisfaction reached with this being able to stand thing that makes you constantly keep trying it. And like I've often thought about that, like how at some primordial experiential level, we're practically relearning standing in that sense. Of course, there's no way to actually find any concrete evidence or anything in regards to that. But like on kind of a philosophy or on a practical level, that is what we're doing, though. Like it is
even just on the mythopoetic level. It's like you're just learning to stand again.
Yeah. And it does have that like because I think there is one thing like also that's a little bit reflecting back to the things that we said or talked about before, like and actually when I got that injury, they sent me to a sports doctor just to get checked if I had like a hernia or whatnot, and he didn't think that it was that, but he spoke with me a little bit about the practice because he was more interested in the psyche and the psychological part of this, and he said that like he asked me like, yeah, so how is it when you practice and like resting and all that? And I said like, yeah, it's one of these things where you you come in every day and you never know exactly where it is. It feels like it's fresh meat, and like you never know if you can. And he said like, a need for control, he said. And I was like, that's it. You like 100%. Like he spotted that immediately before we even had a proper conversation about it. And I think that is I think is part why a lot of people tend to choose handstands, because it's all about control. And in terms of there are many pathological ways of using various things to control how you feel and so on, such as like, or things that are very hard for people, such as eating disorders and things like that. That also do similar things where you control an external factor to feel better about yourself or similar. I've never had one of those, so I can't associate to how that feels, and I'm not comparing that directly to doing a handstand. But I think there is something about this check whether or not you are in control, and that allows you this this quote unquote good feeling. And like since it's so blatantly direct with a handstand compared to all the other things, like I could land the flip, I could do the flare, I could dance well or remember the choreo. Here it's just like I could actually hold it, like because you're so hyper present all the time. It's not like a quick move where you execute and it's the adrenaline and the rush and the force. Here it's just like I was there, like you're experiencing the fullness of it. And I think that is part of that kind of state and awareness thing that that goes into it. And speaking of that, I think there is also kind of how at least I find it, and I think a lot of people will associate with this, that it brings you in touch with both like a very furious and a very calm parts of yourself. And I remember like that is one of the core things that I still say about like why I do handstands. And I think it's because it kind of gets me in touch with like a very, very many facets of my personality. Because it gets me really calm and focused and into the moment as I do it. Then there's a lot of like mental and kind of intellectual analysis of how it works and what I did and like all of those details. And then there is like there's loads of fury when it doesn't work, or it's kind of like frustration, and it's that kind of combat, this kind of like Sisyphean task where you constantly push this rock up the mountain and it just rolls back down again, and you're happy to just keep pushing it up. But like the fact that it kind of touches so many things in a person, I think is part of why it can have such a strong kind of impact and make people want to repeat the task. Because of course, in the first time it's a rush to manage. Time number 500, it's not a rush anymore, but it's kind of a test of some sorts, and you constantly keep pushing the kind of trying to learn new things and all of that, and you find yourself again in this area of learning and testing and challenge. So I think that the fact that it has all of these facets that gives you both something that is beautiful and something that is utterly soul-destroyingly frustrating, and that's what you're constantly doing every single nanosecond is problem solving. And I think that is a very large one. You're always problem solving, and you're there to experience the problem solving. So it's like
definitely
there's certainly something there, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely something you just touched on back there, is you have this constant thing to return to. And there's been some people on Handstand Factory who've been following the Instagram account and have tagged us. There's one girl in particular, and I don't want to say who, but I know behind the scenes she's been going through some difficulties in her private life. And she just posted recently just talking about like handstands. It's just like, I don't know whether I'm obsessed or addicted, but through all the turbulence and all the times I've been going through, it's just been this one constant thing that I can go back to and keeps me sane. And it's very interesting because it's just like, it is a practice that if you stick with it, you could have it your whole life. It will just be there. It will, like, the practice will be the practice. It is just the practice. That's all it is. But in the practice itself, it's like, as you just touched on there, there's like an infinite amount of things to be found. There's the bits of the self, even just like the sensations to be found when you're just doing a handstand, like the exploring of the body and the mapping the body I was talking about before. But even just like letting yourself swim in the sensations and seeing like what you notice. Like, you know, I've been doing handstands a long time, and I had this breakthrough recently about my point of contact on the ground, that my hand is at the point where I can feel the direct, like down to about a square centimeter where the force is going directly through my hand, or the coagulation, or the, what do you call it? The summation of forces through my hand. I can feel exactly where it is. And now I can tell by just paying attention to my hand if the weight's like slightly towards my thumb, or if it's slightly, say, under my ring finger, or if it's slightly forward, slightly back. I can tell what my line is doing exactly. I can tell if my back is arched, if my hip is piked, all this without having to scan that zone in the body, by just focusing on that. And that was like a new revelation. It's the same with like the one arm training. I was sort of on the quest to get my one arm back, and it's just like, now it's just like I don't even care what my limbs are doing. I can even tell like if my feet are not pointed hard enough by this. I just pay attention to that, sink the point into the point I wanted to, and push down through it, and then everything sets up nicely. And it's just like, it's a level of sensation that's just, you know, I was much better in the past than I am now, and I was sort of trying to get back to some modicum of this. And I'm just like, oh, that's something I didn't notice back then when I was better. Why not? But now I can. And it's kind of like there's always, I don't know, something to be found in there to keep you interested.
Yeah. Like I found some stuff yesterday that like I remember having that feeling a long time ago, but now I was like, okay. That is a notable that I need to keep paying attention to in this certain one movement, because if it doesn't feel exactly like that in this exact angle, then it isn't going to work. And I've done the thing for very many years, whereas like suddenly you experience a new thing with it, and it's like, okay. Because when you do that, like it was basically when you go into a one arm L-sit from a one arm handstand, when you press down into it, there's a certain angle. If you feel that the shoulder is lowering even a millimeter there, you will kind of land hard on your arm, and you will feel weight over your fingers more than you should. You need to squeeze the block a lot more, and there's no way in hell you're going back up. Whereas when you do it, like what this thing I sensed yesterday was practically that as I come to this certain point, I can still feel my shoulder being the only pivot point, and the pivot point stays fixed, and it doesn't feel as if I'm sitting on my arm when I'm sitting on my arm. It feels like there isn't force and weight going into my elbow, whereas when I can't do that movement, it feels very painful on the wrist, and it can be dreadful on the elbow because there's so much force that travels into there. So it's really interesting to just see that, like, oh, this is old, but it's new in a sense, in the way of feeling it. So and again, I think it happens especially much with handstands, since you have a lot of time there. Like, for example,
a lot of repetition.
Let's say if I would take like flares in from breakdancing or gymnastics as an example, like a counter example. Like, if I want to be doing, like, if I want to experience flares for 15 seconds, you're doing quite many flares, and it's rather exhausting, and you need to be at quite a high level to do that. And you're going fast, so you're not experiencing the exactness of each angle for very many microseconds per time you do flares for 15 seconds either. While in the handstand, you're constantly sensing, and you kind of, like, as I like to say, you're kind of hyper aware, and you're sort of almost forced into a sort of flow statey type of thing. Because if you're not there, it usually just equates to falling. So I love how that kind of lines up.
Yeah. Definitely. What did you say? You said something what piqued my interest. Yeah, just to bring back to the point on the swimming on the sea sensation, is like, as Mikael saying, he's obviously very high level. And he's like, if you're still finding new sensations that are like particularly when I find one of these sensations in a movement, when I'm like, that is the whole linchpin of what I'm doing, and all I have to do is replicate that now, and then I'm 100% agreed that I'll be able to do this movement out of it. Whereas if I don't get that sensation when I'm in my setup or in thing, it's just going to be heavy, fail, or just not work. And it's kind of, when you're first learning it, it's like, this is the thing, all these sensations come to the body, but then it's you don't pay attention to them or maybe you just don't have the capacity at that moment to pay attention.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things I think handstands gives you as well, is that capacity to focus under pressure and to kind of keep a general sphere of the body going on, where you're like, okay, I have the body in my frame of reference, but then I can allow my focus to shift to one thing. I was like, oh wait, I need to focus on my hand now. Oh, I need to focus on my elbow. And then the rest of the body is kind of, it brings itself to, stands up when it needs to pay attention. It's kind of like that movie, what's that movie with your man who plays about 5 different characters in it, including the Beast?
Not sure.
I don't want to say Face Off. It's... Someone will know, but it's some guy who's got multiple personality disorder. And he's playing... It's one of the movies that is the follow-on to Glass and... Shaman Lama Ding Dong guy.
It's M. Night Shyamalan. Okay, it's one of his movies. Then it's probably bad. What can it be called?
No, it's really good. It's really good.
Is it really good? Wait, is it on? It's not Unbreakable, is it?
No, it's not. No. It's on the same. It's part of the same movies. It's not Unbreakable.
Because he made a lot of garbage, that guy.
Yeah,
but he made a few that were brilliant, but then he just went on like a trash binge. And just like unheard of how bad some of the
Unbreakable trilogy. Hold on. Yeah, hold on.
Yeah, now it's suddenly a movie.
Split. Yeah, Split.
Okay, that one I haven't seen actually.
Oh yeah, it's brilliant. It's really good. It's James McAvoy is in it, and he kills it in the character where he has multiple personalities, and he's playing all these personalities. But this my analogy here is the sensations you get in handstands is kind of like the personalities standing up, and sometimes they become super important, and they're the main thing you're focusing on. But then sometimes they fade to the background and something else stands up, and there's always something to pay attention to. This is what builds the body map. And it's interesting because like the body map can go deeper and deeper. That's first superficially, we're working with the tensions of the body. We're like, how hard am I pointing my toes? How hard am I squeezing my quads? Are my glutes pulling my legs apart hard enough in the straddle? These kind of things. But then it starts going like, I can say in a pike handstand, when I'm doing a pike handstand, I'm actually not really paying attention to what my quads are doing or anything like that. I'm paying attention to what my femur feels like it's doing, because I know if I have the feeling of the femur and the pelvis right, the alignment is right. And that's the kind of thing what we're going for. So you're going deeper and deeper into the body. And it's just interesting to me.
Yeah, and the funny part too is that like when you actually got it, you stop thinking about most of those things. I'm just like trying to think now, like, okay, how do I feel when I do a one arm? Well, I feel that point in the hand, and then I feel the forces traveling a bit, and I stop the forces. That is like primarily the things that I feel. But it gets like certainly like if I change a position or do a movement, I feel more and I concentrate more on certain parts. But I think that like it's like as with all things, as they become ingrained, you need less of the focus on each part and so on. Which is also a very fascinating journey when you get into all of that, or when you learn something new, how you experience something and how that experience changes over time as you just repeat it enough. And like I think handstands is a concrete one, but like for me it's actually a hard one to associate with that because it's been so many years since haven't been able to do it. Whereas in other skills when learning, I can sense or it's more direct, this feeling of seeing that, oh hey, I'm actually better at this right now because my coordination or my something has just kind of done a small skip, small jump up in its kind of level. Remember when I learned, I think still one of the most concrete experiences I have of that is when I learned to write with my left hand in university. Like I would just sit in lectures and just do what we did in in primary school, where you just loop writing the same letter again and again and again. And it was a very distinct sensation of like, first, because I know how all of the characters are supposed to look, but I feel like I'm moving the entire wrist to try to do the movement that, like this micro twitching of my my finger and what's this finger called, Emmet? God damn it.
The hey you come here finger.
The hey you come here finger.
The index finger.
Index finger, Jesus. And the thumb. They're supposed to do this like very fast twitch little motion to do the writing, but you're doing it with the entire wrist and like big finger movements and all that, like. But over time, like over a couple of months, I suddenly saw that, like, hey, I'm actually moving way faster. And then suddenly I was moving from the wrist and or from the fingers. And I could see that, okay, I'm actually doing the writing very clearly as with the right. But I was fatiguing real fast. Like the kind of fleshy part of the thumb, those muscles would get fried really quickly. And then over time, it got pretty good. And still now, many years after, I can write possibly like 80% as well with the left as I can with the right. While brushing the teeth with the left hand, though I've practiced that a lot more, is actually harder than it is to write. You're using all these weird angles with your wrists when you're actually brushing your teeth. And it's funny to think about. If you brush your teeth with your good arm, you'll keep the same rhythm of the relaxed wrist kind of shaking back and forth while you change all these angles. This is not as easy on the left arm. Very, very, very dumb trivia, and it doesn't really connect that well, but you get the point. It's kind of
one of those, you touched on one of the sword and shield hypothesis of lateralization of the brain functions, where the brain functions are lateralized, meaning that different sides of the brain do different things. One of them was sword and shield is the left hand is the shield. It keeps things away. It extends, or so I think it swaps hand depending what side you are. And then the right hand is more about precision. So you'll see this in nature. You'll see like a lot of, say, crabs, I think, will have like one really big claw on their left side and then one small one on the right side, which would be more precise for putting food into the mouth. Whereas the big one will be like, stay away from me, don't go through it. So it's kind of interesting. You see this in the asymmetric tonic neck reflex as well.
What is that?
You see, it's a reflex that kids develop. It's the basis of all sports, basically, or a huge amount of them, where if you turn the head one direction, the arm will go out, the archer reflex, and the other arm bends in. Now, if you look at, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. No one can see what I'm doing in this, so maybe we'll put a photo in.
And it's doing weird things.
It's like boxing. One hand goes out, one hand comes in, head turns, all these kind of things. Oh, wait, it's javelin throwing. Oh, wait, it's throwing a stone. It's a lot of our sports are predicated on this, so it's kind of interesting that you can notice like right hand can do all these weird, complicated, finite movements, whereas left hand is a bit special.
And I guess the opposite if you're left-handed.
Yeah, it's definitely I think we're getting away from the benefits of handstands.
Yes, we have been traveling quite a lot, but I think that is actually kind of interesting.
I think this is one of the benefits of handstands. Like when you get really into it, you can wander a lot in conversations and really go for it.
Yeah,
I have to say.
Yeah, like you automatically like that's like one of the perks of handstands. Like maybe a primary one is that like suddenly you just make a podcast. Like it just like bam happens. It's kind of like. You need to pass like level 65 or something like that and complete a couple of quests, and then like you get the podcast. So yeah,
just the mics turn up for you.
Yeah.
You begin to think, at a certain point of your handstand training, you begin to think your opinions are important on handstand and have to share them with everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
And
then you need to like brain dump every single time. And then whenever you see a slightly not straight handstand, you get this like intense
twitch
feeling of like you start to twitch, and like you have to either tell the person or you need to go home and just like to pray to the handstand gods for like their sins. So
but I don't know if we should stop there.
I think we're approaching the end. Good. It is what it is.
It is what it is. No, it's good. So, benefits of handstand. The main benefit of handstand, to sum it up, is you get to be able to do a handstand and then more complex handstands.
And then you can analyze yourself down the rabbit hole like we did now, and like it won't really matter because you're gonna do the handstand tomorrow, and you're probably going to overtrain and do all those dumb things, and maybe you'll learn from those dumb things one day, and that might also be great.
Yeah, or maybe not. But other than that, thank you for tuning in and listening to us on the Handstandcast. As you know, we are supported by Handstand Factory. If you want to learn how to do handstands from I don't know, beginner all the way to one arms, presses, everything in between, please pick up one of our programs on handstandfactory.com. If you have any questions for our minisodes, please just DM them to us on Instagram or send them to Handstand Factory on Instagram. Or if you go to anchor.fm and find us there, you can actually leave us voice questions and we will play those ones because they're novel and they haven't got bored yet. Other than that, thanks for tuning in and thank you, Mikael.
Cheers.